and the impact of China. I think what you're seeing in the world is that as the emergence of Asia occurs, that the demand for more oil around the world is driving prices very high. The Chinese are supplying to us today toys and Christmas tree ornaments and dog food, but they're going to want to make jumbo jets and patents for various medicines and software. They're going to be a much tougher competition China is than a competitor is that we have seen from Europe in a long time. And the question that I have is, how are we going to make sure that as we compete with China, and I'm going to address this to Mayor Giuliani, as we compete with China, how do we make sure that trade is done in a way that levels the playing field? How do we make sure that China stabilizes the world economically, but that we protect American industry and American jobs and do not cause a departure of jobs from this country? What kind of relations do we need to have with China economically? I know our military issues, but economically, Mayor, what kinds of things do you think we can do to make sure that the trade is done on a level playing field and where American industries are strengthened and not put in jeopardy by virtue of the growth of this great part of the world?
Before, I told you I wasn't going to answer your question. But I will. We were kidding around about the questions before and who was going to ask whom. The reality is that China is a great opportunity for America and a great caution for America, both. It's a great opportunity for us to engage in trade. The more America engages in trade, the more we get to know a country, the less likely we are to have military hostilities. I think we should be working with China to try to push down some of these barriers, protection for intellectual property, rule of law, an ability to sue in China so that you can be protected if you're doing business there. We've got to be very careful about what we import from China from the point of view of safety and security, not as much from the point of view of our economy. And then I think we have to look at the rise of China as a wonderful opportunity. I see 20 or 30 million people coming out of poverty in China every year. To me, that's 20 or 30 million more customers for the United States. That's 20 or 30 million more people we can be selling things to. We should be thinking like aggressive entrepreneurial Americans. What can we sell to China? We can sell them energy independence. They need it more than we do. We can sell them health processes. We can sell them information processes. They're at a level of development that's here. We're at a higher level of development. They need to buy what we have. And then I believe there's a military aspect to it as well. I think we should increase the size of our military substantially to overcome the damage that Bill Clinton did with the peace dividend, because when the two of you were talking about the military, what I wanted to jump in and say was, a lot of the cause of this was Bill Clinton's peace dividend, in which he cut the military 25% and 30%. We've never redone or made up for that damage.
Time.
We have to do that.
Time. Mr. Mayor, and a reminder to our candidates, number one, these are questions to each other, and number two, please use the blinking lights as your guide to when time is up. Senator McCain, your turn to ask a question of one of your colleagues.
Governor Huckabee, you have been one of the strongest and most persuasive proponents of the so-called fair tax. And it is, I must tell you, every town hall meeting I have, there's somebody that shows up with a T-shirt on, and there's enormous groundswell for it. How do you answer the criticism that a flat-out just sales tax wouldn't cause lower-income Americans more of the pain and the burden of running our government and paying for its operations? How do you respond to that particular criticism of it? And also, how do you account for the resonance that this proposal has gotten throughout the nation?
Well, the reason that it's getting resonance is because people would love to see the IRS abolished. They know, as Dr. Phil might say, we've had it since 1913. How's that working out for us? It's not working out so well. The fact is, we're penalized for productivity in this country. The harder you work, the more you earn, the more the IRS and the government wants from you. What the fair tax does is says, we want you to earn, we want you to save, and we want you to buy things and sell things and make a profit. Republicans ought to embrace the fair tax, as should Democrats, because it stops this nonsense and goes to the common sense of the idea that we should encourage people to work and to get something for it. Now, on the bottom end of the spectrum, here's the thing. A lot of people have never read the entire fair tax, because when I first heard about the fair tax or consumption tax, quite frankly, it sounds like it would be oppressive and regressive to the poor. The poor come out best of all because of the provision in the fair tax called the prebate. in which every American each month is given the amount of the fair tax back up to the level of poverty. Everybody gets it, not just those under the level of poverty. It actually untaxes the poor, untaxes the elderly. It makes sure that we don't end up paying taxes on groceries and medicine and the basic necessities of life. And for each third of the economy, there is a benefit, about a 14% benefit for those at the bottom, those in the middle about a 7%, even those at the very top end of the economy end up with about a 5% benefit. Everybody gets in the economy. No more underground economy. Drug dealers, prostitutes, pimps, gamblers, non-Republicans. All of those people out there will be paying taxes. Nobody's working under the table. And so you have now a broad base on which you're receiving the money, and it's a completely different transparent tax system as opposed to the one now where about 22% of our products we buy, the tax is hidden into it. Corporations don't pay tax. They build that cost in, pass it on to the consumer. And what's killing the American economy is that embedded tax and the invisibility of the tax. That's why I support the fair tax. I want to put the IRS out of business.
Governor, there's a real issue of enforceability. I want to ask a follow-up. The Citizens for Tax Justice say that 93% of Americans, in effect, pay less than 15% tax right now. You're imposing a 30% sales tax. How does that help the 93% of Americans who are paying 15% or less right now?
Well, first of all, Tim, it's a 23% if we were to break even. And they're not paying 15%. That's in their visible tax in the terms of the takeout from their checks. When you include the built-in tax, the embedded tax in the products we buy that corporations build in, the average American is paying 33% in his or her taxes. The average American is working through the month of May just to pay off the government. It would be a dramatic difference if the taxpayers got to choose the taxes, which they would do under the fair tax. I think most of us realize that there's got to be a better system. The one we have now is irreparably broken. It's chased jobs. Now we have $12 trillion of working capital moved offshore because our tax system has chased it away.
Time for the rebuttal is up. Congressman Paul, a question for one of your colleagues on stage.
My question is for Senator McCain. This is an economic question that I want to ask. It has to do with the President's Working Group on Financial Markets. I'd like to know what your opinion is of this and whether you would keep it in place, what their role would be, if you would get rid of this group. And if you kept the group, would you make sure we would see some sunlight and know what they're doing and how they're being involved in our markets?
Well, obviously, we'd like to see more sunshine. But I, as president, as every other president, rely primarily on my Secretary of the Treasury, on my Council of Economic Advisors, on the head of that. I would rely on a circle that I have had developed over many years of people like Jack Kemp, Phil Graham, Warren Rudman, Pete Peterson, and the Concord Group. I have a process of leadership, Ron, that is sort of an inclusive one that I have developed, a circle of acquaintances and people that are supporters and friends of mine who I've worked with for many, many years.
So you'd get rid of this group?
Remember back in 1982 when Phil Graham and Warren Rudman and Graham Latta and all of those people got the first real tax cuts done, the first real restraints in taxes. I was there. You were there. And I rely on those people to a much larger degree than any, quote, formal organization, although the Secretary of Treasury is obviously one of the key and important posts that I would have.
Senator, thank you. Governor Huckabee.
Mitt, I'd like to ask you a question that came up during your interview with Tim Russert on Meet the Press, and it has to do with the Second Amendment. You have indicated that you support Second Amendment, but on that interview, you indicated that you also supported the ban on so-called, and I use the term so-called, assault weapons, and supported Brady. For many of us who are strong adherents of the Second Amendment, that's not quite consistent to say you're for Brady and so-called assault gun ban, but support of the Second Amendment, because we see that that's really a denial of the Second Amendment. I'd appreciate some clarification on, do you support Brady? Do you support the assault weapon ban? And your position on exactly what restrictions government should put on